Man, we dropped one of our stations. Let me go add that before we start the full broadcast. I apologize to you guys. Doesn't look like it's going to open up, so we're just going to run it this way. All right, here we go. Welcome into SEC Nightly, the nightly podcast and show dedicated to the top news and notes from the nation's top conference. I'm your humble host, Brooks Austin. Tonight, we will work through the show with a heavy heart as our thoughts and prayers go out to the Bryant family and all those affected by yesterday's news. We will try our very best to take your mind off the tragedy that is this situation and distract you for just a little bit with the latest SEC storylines. However, before we get into the recruiting battles that are still waging over some of the conference's top talents, before we talk about the hiring of Bo Pelini to replace Dave Aranda at LSU, I felt it necessary to tell you what Kobe Bryant meant to me. I'm a LeBron fan, as big of one as you will ever find. And to me, the name Kobe was synonymous with the word enemy for quite some time. Because for so long, that's what he was. Kobe was the dark cloud hanging over my guy's limelight. Kobe was the shining example of that killer instinct that so many told me my superstar lacked. To me, Kobe was the constant reminder of what my favorite player wasn't. The closer, the one willing to put it all on his shoulders at the end of the game, for better or for worse. He was always going to accept the weight of the moment. To me, Kobe resembled the perfect opponent, the perfect competitor in every sense of the word. And as yesterday's news broke, all I could think about was how I wished I had admired his relentless pursuit of dominance a bit more, instead of poking holes in his game just to win some silly argument over who was the better player. But as someone who aspires to be a great father someday, to me, that is how Kobe Bryant will be remembered. As the incredibly loving father and supportive father that he was, filled with so much wisdom and passion for those whom he believed in and those who he loved and cared for. That is the legacy of the legendary Kobe Bryant. That is the legacy that I will always remember from this legendary basketball player. But with that is said, we bring in Cole Thompson, our SEC's Aggie maven over there at Texas A&M, to, again, distract you a little bit from, the saddened news of Kobe Bryant. So I patched Cole in here. Cole, we're going to be talking about the remaining SEC battles that we have still left out there on the recruiting trail. A couple of the nation's top talents, including the nation's top available running back, all still available, all still uncommitted, and we will start there with Zack Evans. Look, this is a recruitment that a lot of people have followed, been one of the crazier ones that we've seen, especially here in recent memory. So what is the most, up-to-date news out there at Texas A&M, one of the teams that were at one point hot and heavy after the nation's top back?
Well, yeah, I think you have to look at it right now as them being potentially still one of the front runners. Everyone that I've spoken to, they're still all in on getting the 5-star from Memorial, Texas, back in the building to stay in the Lone Star State. But there are two other programs that I do think are going to make a run, both in the SEC. As we both know from John Garcia, who works with us at Sports Illustrated All-American, he had a recruiting visit this past weekend up in Knoxville with the Tennessee Volunteers, who also could use another running back in their backfield, especially with the news of Jared Guantano and Brett Maurer both being kind of limited at the quarterback position. You want to be able to rely on a run game. The other school, of course, being LSU, who last year had 2 5-star recruits and running backs, but now have a need for a third runner with Clyde Edwards-Helaire going towards the NFL. All three of these schools definitely have a need for a running back, but I still believe A&M could be one of the front runners due to the lack of depth at the position. Without Isaiah Spiller, they would have nobody coming back this upcoming season from last year who is a scholarship running back. They have the need for the position number 2, and also he is a Texas born and bred kid, so having that ability to keep someone in the state is most important, and I do think that they will be in the running. But keep an eye out for Tennessee. Everything that I've heard, he had a very strong visit with the Volunteers. Jeremy Pruitt needs a second runner, and this could definitely be a surprise with Georgia letting go of the release of the national intent letter.
Yeah, I think for the longest time, right? Most considered that Georgia was indeed the leader for the nation's top back in Zack Zachary Evans. Now, why it is, or, what the reasoning was behind, Kirby Smart and that staff, whether it was they released him out of his letter of intent or whether he asked out of his letter of intent, the consensus is that he was not going to end up in Athens at the University of Georgia. Though as of late, there's been thorough reports that they've been back in contact with Zack Evans. Though as we sit today, I would have to lean towards him not being in Athens. And if I had to pick one of the two leaders between whether it be Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee, or A&M, I think Ole Miss has got some picking up some steam in that recruitment process. Look, Lane Kiffin is no shy recruiter when it comes to going out and getting top talents. He doesn't really care that much, I don't believe, and this isn't something I've spoken to him directly about, but I don't think he cares that much about whatever baggage Zack Evans comes with, as long as that baggage is brought to Oxford and to that campus there at Ole Miss. So I would have to believe that, like you mentioned, Ole Miss is still in the mix. Tennessee having that visit last weekend, all indication is that it went well. So Tennessee going to have a long shot at him as well. What do you think, goes into the decision of whether or not to bring on Zack Evans? And would you bring Zack Evans onto your staff and your roster there, Cole?
Well, for me, covering Texas A&M, I would, but that's because of the lack of depth at the position and because if he is a natural-born Texan. You want to be able to win your state. That is one of the more predominant reasons that you recruit heavily inside your state. And while A&M did receive 13 out-of-state conferences and 11 players who were top at their position in their state, you still want to win your own state. And while Texas is the largest state in recruiting, they still want to win with several players at their own position. Evans would be definitely a great addition to a already loaded offense that's expected to expand in 2020 for this Aggies team. But I do think that you bring up a great point with a guy like Lane Kiffin. He wants one thing and one thing only: production. He doesn't really care about the baggage that comes with it. He doesn't really care about what exactly is going to be a maybe minor flaw. You want to be able to bring in someone who can help your team win now. And when you look at the roster that he has in place, especially with a running quarterback and a passing quarterback in Matt Corral and John Reese Plumlee, respectively, to be able to add another element to that backfield would definitely be something that would keep teams on edge and probably bring them back into relevancy in the first year of the Lane Kiffin era. You bring in Lane Kiffin to bring back relevance to an SEC West contender who just is 4 years removed from being in a New Year's Six bowl game. You want to be able to have that kind of style back, and I think Zack Evans would be an excellent piece to probably help you go from maybe a 5-7 roster your first year to a 7-5, maybe significant bowl game. I mean, we just saw a 7-5 Tennessee team go to a New Year's Day, second bowl, January 2nd bowl game. You want to be able to have that. And I think that a guy like Evans could do that. But I also think Tennessee could be in the running. When you have a need out of position and you could probably guarantee more starting reps there, I could see him probably going into that decision. But I think all three teams, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, I think would all be in the running. I think A&M would be the most lenient to let him slide. But I think Ole Miss would be definitely a great landing spot for him for a position of need, number one, but also a player who definitely could come in and bring something to an offense that maybe is already not there.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the baggage, and you talked about Lane Kiffin, so did I. I mean, Lane Kiffin himself's got his own baggage, so I don't think he's one to judge or question, a kid coming into college. But, one thing I will say is if Zack Evans does not end up at the University of Georgia, it's not because Zack Evans did not want to go to the University of Georgia, from what I'm being told. That's what I will say. With that being said, let's move on to Lad McConkey, a guy that's really, really gained steam lately in this recruitment process. Got his offer from the University of Georgia just about this time last week, and then right after that got an offer from Vanderbilt, still awaiting an offer from his favorite school, Tennessee. Now, it doesn't take long digging through, being a detective into Lad's social media to find out that he is a Tennessee Volunteers fan. So what are your, initial thoughts about Lad McConkey as a football player? And why do you think Tennessee's waiting so long for a recruit that obviously Georgia and, Vanderbilt, a team that's been rather competitive with Tennessee over the last couple of years, has already offered, Cole?
I think maybe it's just due to the fact that they want to see what they already have in place and what they're losing. When you lose out on receivers such as Jawan Jennings, who was a senior who was leaving the program, you want to be able to find someone who can replace him. And if there's no one on the roster right now that maybe could bring that production, you offer a guy like McConkey. But there is reports that McConkey will take his official visit to Athens this upcoming week. So you will see him on campus if you are in the Georgia area. And of course, Vanderbilt's a team that's going to want to compete. If he is offered Tennessee, I do think that that is the ultimate landing spot because of his social media background, his presence with the team. He is pretty close to it, but he also is a Georgia native coming from Chatsworth. So that could have some ties between there and Vanderbilt. But I think that at the end of the day, we have to wait to see what could happen in the upcoming weeks before he makes his final decision. When National Signing Day officially commences, Georgia could be the easy landing spot because it is close to home. But if Tennessee was to come in late with an offer, they're competing in the SEC East. And with what Georgia is losing this offseason, you definitely could see Tennessee being a prime contender to possibly compete with Florida and the Bulldogs to possibly make a run for the title down in Atlanta next season. All is plausible. And if Ladd McConkey could bring someone like that to the offense, I don't see why Jeremy Pruitt's waiting around to offer him.
Yeah, I don't really either. And you talked about the subtractions off of that Georgia offense and some of the areas of improvement that they need. How about an addition that they brought onto the staff, right? Todd Monken going to be running a lot of empty sets next year, a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, a lot of sets that require a player like Ladd McConkey. And he told us over there at SI's Bulldog Maven, that's exactly the pitch that they're giving him. They're telling him, look, we're going 4 wide. We're going to play a lot of 11 personnel, which is a pro spread as they call it. But we're going to need wide receivers, especially go 4 wide and 5 wide on 3rd and longs, and they're going to need space creators like Ladd McConkey moving forward. So as far as the hindrance or what Tennessee's waiting on, I don't know. I think maybe that they know since they're, going to be one of those tables or one of those hats on the table on National Signing Day no matter what, due to his fandom ties there to the University of Tennessee. A lot of people don't know in that North Murray area here in the state of Georgia, that's volunteer country. I know it's in the state of Georgia, but North Murray, Dalton, all those areas up there, even Rome, Georgia, the northwest side up there, that's all volunteer country territory. So they'll definitely get the first crack at him. And back to Zack Evans just for a quick minute for those who didn't or just joining us on the live stream. One thing that's got to be taken into consideration there, Cole, Dajon Edwards, the 4-star running back from Colquitt County, was just in town at Athens this past weekend for an official visit as well. So they were kind of, cold on the Dajon Edwards trail earlier in the year. Things picked up a lot lately in terms of Georgia's pursuit for the 4-star running back out of Colquitt County. So that's just something to look into and to pay attention to. If you see Dajon Edwards start to hint or lean towards a Georgia commitment, or if you start seeing crystal balls continue to roll in for Dajon Edwards, that's probably indication that he's going to end up in Athens and Zack Evans will not. On to our next guy. Here's Cole, a big nose tackle out of the state of Mississippi, McKinley Jackson, a guy who's considering Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and Texas A&M. Give us your thoughts on the big 4-star defensive tackle out of the Magnolia State.
I definitely think that right now you have to look at Alabama as being probably the ideal landing spot with what they're losing on the defensive line. You're going to have to replace someone like Raekwon Davis. And while, of course, it's easy when you have a pipeline like Alabama that's going to be able to make that move easily over to whoever they want to replace that production, you want to have a guy who's next in line. And that's the biggest thing. McKinley Jackson, big guy, is really close to Tuscaloosa. I think he's only a 75-mile drive, close to home. There's more connection to that program with him, probably more so than you would with a team like Texas A&M or LSU. When you look at all that combined, I definitely see Alabama being a landing spot. They could also probably redshirt him for a year due to what they already have in the defensive line packages. They could keep him then for 3 seasons, allow him to graduate with a 4-year degree, and then be able to start building around this defensive line. One thing that Nick Saban and his staff has always been known for is building for the future with the present. They always will reserve spots for players who maybe don't have the exact skills that you want for day one, and maybe a guy like Jackson fits that mold. That is why I think that when you look at everything leading up to National Signing Day, a school like Alabama definitely could use him, number one, and he could probably use Alabama as well to build off of his production for 1 season and then have a year of redshirt to be able to learn the new system.
Yeah, it seems like, for a school like Georgia or maybe a program like Oregon, it seems like they got to the party on McKinley Jackson just a little bit late. Obviously Alabama's been putting in work on the in-state kid for quite some time. So I tend to agree with you there, Cole. I believe he is leaning towards the Crimson Tide, and obviously we'll find out come National Signing Day with that big nose tackle. Going to be interesting to see what happens to him once he gets into a professional weight training program and once he gets into a collegiate weight profile. Is he going to continue to play at 330 pounds? I just don't know. That's probably not a steady weight that he can end up holding and play with the speed that he's going to need to at the Division I and SEC level. So we'll see what happens there. And if it is Alabama, what a great program for him to enter into. Even guys as late as, as recent as Quinnen Williams. That body didn't look like that body until after a couple of years in that program with that weight training facility. So on to our next guy, another big guy we'll be talking about here, Marcus Henderson, the offensive guard out of Memphis, I believe. What are your thoughts on the big man, and where might he end up being come National Signing Day, Cole?
Well, if you know anything about the SEC, if you're in the Memphis area and you root for an SEC team, you might be from the Volunteer State, but you're all Ole Miss. That's how close Oxford is to the program. And with the new signing of Lane Kiffin, this just seems like a match made in heaven. You get a big disruptive bull rusher up the interior to be able to play in probably a 4-3 defense for a guy like Kiffin. You're able to go and build your defensive line, something that Matt Luke was doing very well before he was fired earlier this season. You pair all that together with an offensive innovative mind like Kiffin, you have exactly what you want to build for your program and bring hope back to Vaught Hemingway Stadium, something that hasn't been there since the early days of Hugh Freeze. Even though Matt Luke was loved by his players, he wasn't able to get the exact results done on the field that would allow you to justifiably keep him there. A guy like Henderson joining the program from Memphis, who has offers from bigger schools such as Arkansas, such as Missouri, maybe programs that are a little more established than what you can see on paper, or even a school like Mississippi State who gets another big-time player in Mike Leach coming to the program. To be able to win in Memphis when you are Ole Miss that close to the program is so important, and a guy like Henderson I think would definitely fit in a Lane Kiffin defense.
Yeah, Memphis is notoriously rebel country. I mean, that is almost an extended portion of the Ole Miss fan base right there. I know they have the Memphis Tiger program right there, but if you talk to a lot of people from Memphis, if they had to choose who their big football program is, it's most likely, the Ole Miss Rebels down there. One thing that's curious about the Marcus Henderson recruitment process, Cole, is, heavily recruited by Matt Luke, and I think you touched on that over there at Ole Miss. Little funny thing, 2 days after Matt Luke signed as the new offensive line coach for the University of Georgia, Marcus Henderson received his first offer from the University of Georgia. That is not by mistake. That is not coincidence. I don't know if that was, necessarily Matt Luke extending a hand, just being nice. I mean, offers these days are almost free of charge. You can just hand them out. I mean, quite literally, the University of Tennessee averages about 420 offers per recruiting class. That is not a joke. That is a real number. Quite a lot of offers being handed out nowadays, and that could have been just one of those courtesy offers. I recruited you heavily at my last school. I'm going to continue to do so at my new school just in case one day you get unhappy and are looking to transfer and continue to be a 4-star talent. So I do think Marcus Henderson is going to end up landing there at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. Look, Lane Kiffin's going to recruit fairly decently at Ole Miss. No one at that school has recruited in the top 10 consistently without doing some, illegal stuff. Let's go ahead and call it that way. No one's been able to do it. So you almost got to out scheme and design folks at that school. You're not going to be able to over recruit it well. But as you mentioned, Cole, they're going to have to dominate the local areas like Memphis. And it starts in the 2020 class with Marcus Henderson. And now we talked about Lad McConkey, Cole, another 3-star cornerback. Another 3-star player that's had a similar late rise in his recruitment process is Enos Raekwon. This is a cornerback out of Duncanville High School, Texas, that prior to October of this past season in 2019, his senior year at Duncanville, one of the biggest and best schools in the state of Texas, did not have a single Power 5 offer until Missouri rolled in and gave them an offer. And after that, it's been hell on high water. Every single big Power 5 school coming in and offering. My sources and my belief is that this recruitment is down to Alabama and Missouri. Cole, what do you think about the Texas native out there from Duncanville High?
I do think that you could see maybe a late push from a school like Texas. Now they know that Chris Ash is going to be the defensive coordinator. You, of course, want to get a guy to come in. But also Alabama is another big school. They're going to lose 2 cornerbacks this year in Patrick Surtain and Trayvon Diggs, and they're going to want to replace him pretty immediately. And, that's the biggest thing that you learn about Alabama. Some of the lowest recruiting players end up being big-time stars. A guy like Levi Wallace, who was a middle 3-star, ended up becoming a powerhouse in his final year for the Crimson Tide and got a chance to go play in the NFL and now is a starting cornerback because of what he learned under the Nick Saban style. So I do think that does sell a little bit. But if you want a starting potential, I think Missouri maybe offers that in the first year. Either way, I do think that those are 3 schools that you do look at. He is going to be, of course, recruited, I think, by Texas just a little bit because of it is the hometown. Then you have to look at Alabama. They are the powerhouse who are dominated. And Nick Saban doesn't really lose out on guys that he really wants. It's more so other schools are willing to give maybe a little bit more leniency than what Saban maybe does. He wants to win, but he wants to win the way that he sees fit. Other schools are maybe willing to say, oh, we'll give you a starting job, and then you have to work for it, where Saban comes out and completely says it. If Eli Drinkowitz does a very good job in his first season in the recruiting process, he can land a guy like him. If not, this is Saban's guy to lose. It's always been the case, and I do think that that's the case coming forward.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Enos, and one thing I'll tell you, Cole, is he's the type of football player, and especially the type of young man, that he's going to embrace a challenge. Honestly, if you walked into his living room and said, look, Enos, we'll start you as a true freshman, just commit to our school, I don't think that's an appealing argument or an appealing pitch to a guy like this. This is a guy who's adamant about continuing to carry the chip on his shoulder that's led up until this point. Again, a guy that had 0 to little interest from the Power 5 level just a couple of months ago. And again, I don't think that's an appealing strategy if you're trying to get Rakestraw to commit to your university. As in fact, I think the approach that Saban's most likely to take of, look, we're not going to give you anything. We're going to give you this offer, and that's going to be it. It's going to be a committable offer, but everything after that, you're going to have to earn, and by God, earn every second of playing time. Even like a place like Georgia. Look, they don't tell guys, they don't promise them early playing time. They don't tell them they're going to start them. But I guarantee you one thing Kirby Smart does go in there and say is, look, we had 42 guys last year on our defensive roster that played at least 40 snaps. Okay, it's deep over there at the University of Georgia, and everybody plays. That is their recruitment pitch, but that's because they recruit 5 stars regularly. You got to get those young kids on the field. Enos Rakestraw, not exactly cut from that cloth. Again, this is a heavy chip on the shoulder guy, the definition of one. Cole, I got to take a break, but I do want to keep you around to talk about Bo Pelini's hire there at LSU or rehiring. But let's take this quick break real quick, brought to you by our SEC network of Mavens. Look, man, if you've got a team here in this great conference, if you've got a favorite team that you want to know all the latest and greatest news about, hit up SI.com, click NCAA, find your favorite team. I guarantee you we've got a writer such as myself or such as Cole doing their very best to cover it at the very best and most professional level. So head on over there to SI.com, find your team, and get the info you need today. All right. Now, Cole, let me pat you back in here. All right. So, Bo Pelini hired today as the defensive coordinator to replace Dave Aranda. First of all, what do you think they lost in Dave Aranda there to the University or Baylor University, not the University of Baylor? What do you think they lost in their defense coordinator in Aranda, and what do you think he brings to the table out there in Waco?
Well, they lose the top recruiter. That's number one. And the SEC loses one of the best defensive minds in college football, in my opinion. What he's been able to do outside of this past season for the Tigers defense has been phenomenal. And he's been nothing short of part of the biggest success story for LSU, keeping them afloat. And one of the best things I think that that Coach Ed Orgeron did was keep Aranda around when you switched over from a guy like Les Miles to Ed Orgeron. It was a great move, and it was a great move to keep him as part of the defense, and he's known for bringing up the NFL talent. Everything that we've seen from guys like Tre'Davious White in recent years, Jamal Adams for the 1 year, even guys I think like Christian Fulton and Greedy Williams all learned how to play under a guy like Dave Aranda. So you're getting a great recruit who's going to be able to keep, I think, the process going in Waco. They made an excellent hire, in my opinion, in Larry Fedora as the offensive coordinator. You pair those two together, a great defensive mind and a great offensive mind, put them together, and hopefully you win in recruiting in the Big 12. Baylor could be still a very solid team. I think a 9-3 season, 8-4 year in the first year of the Aranda era isn't a bad year when you look at it on paper, and especially if you can win in the Big 12 that has teams such as Texas looking to move up, an Oklahoma State team that's getting more a veteran advanced style, who didn't really lose that much to the draft with Chuba Hubbard coming back, and an Oklahoma team that's always going to be dominant with a guy like Lincoln Riley running the helm.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Aranda going to Baylor, I think they did the very best they could. And look, they keep on the same theme of Matt Rule. Look, a defensive-minded coach, a disciplinarian, an energetic football coach. They plug almost the same situation in with Dave Aranda. Now, this isn't a guy who's had recent college, coaching success as a head coach like Matt Rule did, turning around Temple prior to his arrangement there in Baylor. But I think Aranda takes over, obviously, a much better situation that Matt Rule had just a couple of years ago. The 3 seasons that Rule spent there, talk about a turnaround, man. Baylor was along one of those names that at one point it was shamed amongst more than any other program in the country. 3 years later, they're playing in a Sugar Bowl. They had gone 14-3, I believe, in their last 17 football games, and now they get a great recruiter, another great defensive mind in there as a head coach. Cole, what do you think Bo Pelini brings to that LSU staff? Obviously a former head coach. You had a guy that spent 7 years as the head coach in Nebraska, took that team to 6 straight bowl games. So the success he's had as a head coach. But stylistically, how do you think he matches coming back to the SEC, a conference he hasn't seen since 2007?
Well, I think he comes back with a lot of power. He's not been just sitting on the sidelines. He's been a head coach just for a different program at Youngstown State University at the FCS level. And he's done a fantastic job keeping the Penguins relevant, even without a guy like Jim Tressel, who was originally the head coach of the program, keeping them around and keeping them in the running for an FCS title every single season. You want to have a guy who has that veteran presence to be able to keep a defense afloat. And that's something that he was always able to do at Nebraska, working with guys like Ndamukong Suh, working with other players. You bring in that type of guy, and you bring in the type of guy who maybe isn't the best at recruiting, but knows a veteran presence and what it takes to win in the SEC as someone who was there before. Absolutely, this is a very good hire. What is going to be the major area of concern is, can he take the younger recruits and be able to transform them, kind of how Dave Aranda was able to do because he was a younger-minded player. This is a veteran coach who's been around and been a head coach for the last decade, now coming back to be a coordinator. You want to be able to relate with some of these kids. So some of the hires that maybe he makes underneath him will be just as important to the longevity of the actual program, especially on the defensive side of the ball. That is, I think, what's going to make or break this Bo Pelini hire. But on paper, he does look like a great fit. He knows the area. He knows the recruiting trail out in Baton Rouge and all around the SEC. To be able to welcome back a very highly touted defensive mind who helped bring a national championship to the Baton Rouge area, the last one before this past year. You're replacing a champion with a champion in Baton Rouge. I think it's a very good hire.
All right, last question before I let you plug all your great stuff over there at the Aggie Maven. Let's talk Texas A&M for a second. Take us to College Station. What are they getting? Recently stole a couple of coaches off of the University of Georgia staff, not only James Coley, but you take Malchow, I guess that's how you pronounce it, the director of player personnel. So a little bit of a hit to the recruiting steam and train that Kirby Smart's built here in Athens. What does the new staff look like there in College Station?
Well, I think when you add that plus TJ Rushing, who was going to be the defense coordinator who was going to work with the defense coordinator at Florida State, to be able to get him as your new defensive backs coach to replace Maurice Linguist, who went to the NFL, you're getting 2 guys who know what they're doing and have been able to produce NFL talent. One thing that you have to know is that a guy such as Coley has already worked with someone such as Jimbo Fisher in the past. They worked together as when he was the tight ends coach from 2008 to 2010 at Florida State. And then he was a predominant player to keep around when Fisher was promoted to the head coach. He actually took over for 2 seasons as the offensive coordinator. So you already know what you're working with. And this is a guy who's been heralded for being able to progress tight end production. And with 2 guys such as Baylor Cupp and Jalen Weidemeyer, who was a standout player, personally my favorite offensive player for A&M this past season, you're going to be able to go get 2 double tight end sets that Coley was able to run very well at both Georgia and also at Miami to be able to bring to College Station. And with Kellen Mond, you want to be able to rely on that passing game however possible. And someone like I think a guy like Coley is going to be able to get the most out of Kupp, who was a 5-star level, the #1 tight end prospect in the state of Texas, and a guy like Weidemeyer, who was a fantastic bring-in to the program. So now you have that.
Yeah.
And with Malshaw, you're replacing a great recruiter with another great recruiter and one who knows the SEC very well. Dave Aranda was able to take Austin Thomas away from College Station. Now you get Malshaw, who can probably win in the Georgia in West Alabama area to be able to bring College Station into relevancy. A lot of people forget Auburn is right next to Georgia. That's why they call it between the hedges, because it's right there on the border between the two. If you can win both those areas and be able to bring talent that comes out of Alabama and also Georgia to the Lone Star State, that's a big win. Malshaw knows that area very well, and he's going to be able to turn that player personnel into a powerhouse. Everything that we've seen from Jimbo Fisher up to this point has been relevant. But you also look at the Dan Mullen hire, who was made that exact same year, and what he's been able to do at Gainesville in 2 years. Year 3 is a make or break year on a $75 million contract for someone such as Fisher, who left a program such as Florida State to go bring relevance to College Station. If you see an 8-4 year, that's not going to fly anymore. With a veteran roster, with an easier schedule, and with someone who you've worked with in the past, pretty much giving all the power towards your staff. Ross Bjork has allowed Texas A&M to be run the way Fisher sees fit, and now the production needs to start picking up. But I think the Coley hire is fantastic. I think the Malshaw hire is a great replacement for someone like Austin, and Fisher has everything to look forward to in 2020.
Absolutely, Cole. Tell the folks where they can find you on all your social media and where they can find your great work over there on Aggie Maven.
All you got to do is check out All Aggies at si.com/collegefootball/TAMU or All Aggies, or check out all my great work at Mr. Cole Thompson. Really simple. I'm Cole Thompson. I'm a Mr. That's my name. Don't wear it out. Check me out at Mr. Cole Thompson. All of our great work at Aggies SI and at si.com, All Aggies.
All right, brother. I appreciate you for joining us. We'll have you some other time, okay?
Awesome. Thanks, Brooks, for having me.
Yeah, man. All righty, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be our show for tonight. If you haven't figured out by now, we do this Monday through Friday starting at 9 p.m. We live stream all over the fabulous platforms wherever you find us, whether that's on my YouTube page, where I will be breaking down the outside wide receivers. That means we get to marvel over what an incredible football player George Pickens is tonight. That will be available tomorrow morning on my YouTube page. Just search Brooks Austin, or probably just type in Jamie Newman over there on YouTube. I'll be one of the probably top videos to pop up. But we do this anyways, Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m., live stream everywhere. Eventually, we are probably going to open up, a commenters show where we take live questions, all that good stuff. But for the main part, we run this like a live television show. We bring in, we run this like a news channel for the Southeastern Conference, the top conference in all of sporting world. We love it here. Here at SEC Nightly, follow us on Twitter. Let me throw that up there for you. Follow us on Twitter at SEC Nightly. That's it right there. You can follow me on Twitter at Brooks Austin SI. Again, check out all the great stuff we do over there at the Bulldog Maven as well. If you are a Georgia fan, which most of my Twitter followers are and my YouTube subscribers are, you can check out all the great work we do over there at the Bulldog Maven. That's si.com/college/Georgia. We appreciate all you guys for tuning in. And for you podcast listeners, that's right, we do have a podcast. If you cannot catch the live stream, if you come in and out of the live stream, if you're unable, if you got to go to the bathroom, got to take a break, got to do whatever it is you got to do, you can catch out the full show wherever, however you get your podcast. And while you're there, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscribe, give us all that good stuff. Show us your support. Show us that you enjoy our show. We appreciate you guys for listening. We'll see you next time. I'm Brooks Austin. This has been SEC Nightly. Have a great one.